This is nuts. I mean, the fact that we are where we are right now, this is crazy. Honestly, the fact that some publications are talking about World War III, I'm sitting here like, this is an out-of-body experience. And you know what? I have no faith in this administration's ability to resolve this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Not at all. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trish Regan Show. I am Trish. It's good to have you here today. Meanwhile, apparently I'm not the only one. If you look at these new poll numbers on Biden's ability to address this, whether it be the economy or whether it be the Ukraine-Russia situation, Americans have no faith whatsoever. We are brought to you today in part by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Go to legacypminvestments.com today. Again, that's legacypminvestments.com. But this is sort of surreal. I mean, the idea that we've now got 150,000 Russian troops in Ukraine, sectioning off parts of Ukraine, and the administration still hasn't, I guess today now they're finally announcing new sanctions. I mean, come on guys, this should have been done weeks ago, okay, months ago. This is what you do when you have an aggressor and you're trying to control it. Now look, I think there's a lot of different sides to this, and we can get into all of them because I empathize with how Russia may feel about having Ukraine and NATO at its back door. I understand that. But nonetheless, there are ways to deal with this diplomatically before escalating the crisis as it has now been escalating, because now innocent people are going to get hurt in the process. Again, I am not alone. You look at these poll numbers, a new poll out today, and what you see is that Americans are just tired of this. Only 36% of Americans approve of how Biden is handling this Ukraine standoff. Only 40% have any faith in his ability to manage foreign policy. Frankly, I'm sort of shocked that 40% have any faith in his ability, or rather, only 40%. I would think it would be more like 15% or 20%, because you saw how poorly Afghanistan went. You've seen how he's effectively been on the wrong side of history like forever, right? As long as he's been in Washington, including on the wrong side of the Iraq situation. So what is there to suggest that he's going to get this right at this moment in time? In terms of some other numbers, it's interesting to see. This is a Gallup poll that was taken between February 1st and February 17th, just released. Only 40% again approving of his foreign affairs situation. Only 37% approving of his handling of the economy. 62% disapprove. And then the situation with Russia specifically, only 36% approve. I mean, this is proving out that Americans are no fools. Americans understand that this situation is not going very well, and it's pretty evident. Very quickly, I just want to remind you, you can join my chat on Locals. I'm going to be live there on Friday afternoon. I'm live there every single week. We have a wonderful group, just a really, really special group of people that are supporters of the Trish Regan Show, supporters of the TrishIntel.com website. We've all gathered there on Locals, which is a terrific platform, and you can really, in my view, exercise your freedom of speech in a very special way there. So go to TrishRegan.Locals.com. You can sign up for free. You can support the show and support the group if you'd like. But again, sign up is free at TrishRegan.Locals.com. The other thing that I did want to mention to you before we get back into the Russia situation is that you got to take a look at the Association of Mature American Citizens, otherwise known as AMAC. I want you to take a look at this organization, because when people say, hey, is there anything I can do right now to help save America? I say, go to this organization, specifically amac.us/Regan, amac.us/Regan. It's the Association of Mature American Citizens, and they care so much about all the things that you and I care about. Conservative American values. A subscription is only $16 a year, which is amazing. It's an amazing deal because you get all kinds of great discounts on hotels, on airfare, on restaurants, all that good stuff. And you know that your values are being represented in Washington, D.C., because AMAC is carrying all your concerns straight to Capitol Hill with the AMAC advocacy team. So it's a good thing all around. AMAC membership is good for America. It's good for you. Sign up today. You can join 2.3 million Americans in having a voice. Again, go to amac.us/Regan today. You're doing something good for America. You're doing something good for you. I am so proud that they are one of the sponsors of this show. amac.us/Regan, R-E-G-A-N. Sign up today. And let's get back here to the insanity that our world is right now in as Russian troops now increasingly are moving into Ukraine. Now, it's not as easy as some want to make it and say, okay, Vladimir Putin doesn't belong there. We need to do everything we can to get him out. Yeah, look, I get it. We don't want him there. NATO doesn't want him there. The Europeans don't want him there. The Ukrainians certainly don't want him there. And we've made it very clear that we wouldn't accept him being there. And yet now we've got a new team in there, the Biden administration, and he's there. Vladimir Putin is now there in Ukraine, taking two specific regions. This comes on the heels of the Obama administration's allowing him to annex Crimea. And so you got to say, why is it that he's willing to take this ground? Why is he willing to challenge the West in ways now that he wasn't before? I think it's worth examining that, because for whatever reason, for 4 years, Vladimir Putin did not feel that he needed to take these territories. Meanwhile, you got Zelensky there over in Ukraine threatening the use of nukes. I mean, you want to talk insane. What are we going to have, World War III? Because of Russia, I'll tell you one thing. Remember Mitt Romney? Remember when Mitt Romney said that our biggest threat would actually be Russia in the future, and Obama tried to laugh him off the stage, and the Democrats thought, oh, that was so funny. Well, guess what? He was absolutely positively right. And we're seeing this play out now in real time. So we have a problem. You got Zelensky hinting at honestly crazy stuff, the threat of nuclear weapons. I mean, what are they trying to do? I understand, one is trying to up the other, but this is where you need real diplomats, okay? This is where the State Department is supposed to really come into its own. I have my concerns because I don't think, being led by Antony Blinken, we're in the best of shape. Keep in mind, this is the man that allowed our president, and I say allowed our president because clearly our president, Joe Biden, was not thinking clearly when he made such an effort to get out of Afghanistan before actually getting our troops and our people and our allies out of Afghanistan, right? That was just what you call one big colossal F-up. Well, we now may be looking at another one. And I don't know how else to describe this, but diplomacy should be at work. In other words, sanctions should have been employed a lot earlier than today. And yet we're looking at the White House now finally saying that they're going to use some more sanctions. I mean, you've got Germany finally saying, okay, Nord Stream's not going to happen. Why the heck, by the way, were we okaying the use of that natural gas pipe, the construction of that, while simultaneously refusing our own pipeline, the Keystone pipeline here in the U.S.? I mean, none of these things really made any sense. We should have taken a much stronger stance with Russia way earlier, but we didn't. And here we are today. Again, I go back to the importance of diplomacy, the use of things like sanctions, because you should always be willing to lose dollars rather than lives. And we needed to sanction Russia a whole lot earlier. The other thing that we needed to do was really sit down at the table and have a real diplomatic effort, because one should be willing to understand what's at stake here for Russia, right? Can you imagine? I think this is a fair comparison. If we had China right there on the Mexico border or on the Canadian border, we wouldn't be so psyched about it, right? And this is how Vladimir Putin and the Russians view NATO. There's a lot of holdover there from Cold War days. There's a lack of trust. And even though they do business with the Europeans, there's still a fundamental lack of trust, much like we have with China, right? We do business with China, and yet we fundamentally don't really trust China. So if China were to set up shop, there in Canada or in Mexico, we'd kind of have a problem with it. You can understand that. You can empathize with that, and you can try and work with that framework in mind. And yet it doesn't seem like anybody in Washington is actually taking that into consideration. And now we find ourselves in this massive standoff. So Ukraine doesn't want them there, and yet simultaneously you have pockets of Ukraine, including these two areas, that are quote unquote ethnically Russian. I mean, I told the story on my American Consequences podcast about how I used to have a Ukrainian trainer, phenomenal athlete who got me in terrific shape, especially after all my babies. Anyway, this Ukrainian trainer married a woman from the Crimea region, and so he identified, because he was from Kiev, as Ukrainian. She identified as Russian, and that's often the case there, right? Because you have pockets of Ukraine that are identifying as Russian. And so now you got one big giant mess. Look, people should be able to be free to kind of decide what they want, right? And I think the nation of Ukraine wants to be able to be free enough to say, hey, if we want to be part of the European Union and have the economic freedom that comes with being part of the EU, then let's go for it. Yet, Russia's like, wait a second, that means, NATO is going to be on our doorstep. I will say this. I think long term, there's going to be some real questions about Europe going forward, in that Europe is still very fragmented. And if they want to really be able to exercise their power against the likes of Russia, they're going to have to recognize that they need to be the United States of Europe, much like we are the United States of America. In other words, they need an Alexander Hamilton in the room saying, okay, let's work together to make sure we're politically and fiscally, monetarily united, right? You can't have all these separate governments, and the separate language is fine, separate cultures, I get it. But if you're going to try to be a force militarily, you got to actually be Europe, like together as Europe, fighting something together as Europe, rather than, looking back to the United States all the time for help, which, is ultimately perhaps what's going to happen here. And that's not going to go over well. I'm telling you, the American people do not have the appetite for anything like this. The American people do not have the appetite for war. And all this talk of Russia going in and taking parts of Ukraine, I think it's really going to exhaust Americans' patience with the Biden administration at this point. There is not a lot of faith in his ability, and we're struggling with economic challenges of our own. The last thing that we need is to get dragged into some massive conflict here. I don't think that'll ultimately happen. I think that we'll sort of manage through this. It may be a kind of appeasement situation where Putin gets a little bit more, but I think it's an awakening that we should all have, because you need to be strong in response, and you can't allow this perception of weakness, because this weakness creates opportunity for players in the world that we don't want. Okay, let's just say that we don't want them to have a larger voice on that international stage, because they don't have and they don't protect the same value system that we believe in. So with that said, we also don't want to be risking too much of ourselves. I suspect ultimately what this will mean is that he takes more of Ukraine, and it's going to become all the more important for us in 2024 to have a leader there in the executive office, in the White House, that makes it clear this is not going to be tolerated. We're not going to continue to allow Russia to encroach on the rest of Eastern Europe or Europe in general. That will not be allowed. Unacceptable. Point of no return kind of thing. All right. Thank you, everyone. I just want to remind you, I will be on Locals. I will be on Locals this week on Friday, and we're going to be talking live there. I imagine there'll be a lot more developments here in this whole situation in Ukraine, so we can talk about that. I want to talk about the markets as well, of course, with you, because we've got a big sell-off underway. As one friend said to me, though, this week, perhaps it's not really Putin that everybody should fear, but instead Jerome Powell and this threat of higher interest rates, which I think is long overdue, but nonetheless will be painful for the markets. Maybe it's opportunity, though. Maybe this is the time to be sharpening your pencil and looking for those market opportunities. Anyway, we can talk about all of that. Don't forget to subscribe on Locals. Go to trishregan.locals.com. I will see you there, and I will see you right back here tomorrow. Thanks for listening.